You walk into a stadium holding 50,000 people. The crowd is roaring, vendors are selling snacks, and in a few minutes you're going to watch someone die on purpose as entertainment, and nobody around you will think that's strange. That was a normal Tuesday in ancient Rome. We think of sports as games. Rome thought of them as a public service. Literally, the biggest venues were funded by the state, and being sent free tickets was considered a basic right of Roman citizenship. The poet Juvenal complained that all the average Roman wanted from his government was bread and circuses, free food, and free violence to watch. He wasn't being clever. He was describing state policy. Let's start with the gladiators, because that's the image everyone already has in their head. Here's the part that surprises people. Most gladiators weren't randomly grabbed off the street. They were an investment. A trained gladiator took years to develop, and a good one could fight for a decade or more, surviving dozens of matches. Owners didn't want their fighters to die. Dead gladiators were an expensive loss. Historians estimate the actual death rate per fight was closer to 1 in 5 or 1 in 10, not the constant bloodbath movies show you. The fights were closer to a brutal rehearsed sport with real rules, real referees, and real training schools called ludi, some of which still stand in Rome today. But here's where it gets darker. Gladiator fights were the undercard. The real spectacle, the thing Romans actually organized their calendars around, was chariot racing. The Circus Maximus in Rome could seat somewhere between 150,000 and 250,000 people, more than almost any stadium built in the 2,000 years since. 4 teams competed: the Reds, Blues, Greens, and Whites. People didn't just watch. They had lifelong loyalty to a color. They rioted over it. They bet fortunes on it. And emperors picked a team publicly the way politicians today wear a sports jersey to look relatable. The danger wasn't staged. Chariots at full speed, tight turns, 7 laps, multiple chariots trying to occupy the same 6 feet of track. Crashes were constant, and a fallen charioteer tangled in his own reins could be dragged to death in seconds. And yet people did this professionally for decades because the payout was enormous. The most famous charioteer in Roman history, Gaius Appuleius Diocles, raced for 24 years, won over 1,400 races, and retired with winnings that one modern economic historian calculated at roughly the equivalent of $15 billion in today's money, making him, by that measure, the highest-paid athlete who has ever lived. So why did an entire civilization build its public life around watching people risk death for sport? Part of the answer is political. Emperors used these games to keep the population entertained and distracted, and to publicly display their own power and generosity. Funding a spectacular show was a direct way to buy popularity. Part of the answer is cultural. Roman identity was built on military conquest, discipline, and the idea that facing death without flinching was the ultimate proof of character. Watching someone perform that composure in the arena wasn't seen as cruelty, it was seen as a lesson in virtue. And part of the answer is something a lot less flattering and a lot more familiar. The scale of violence people would tolerate as entertainment crept upward slowly, one event at a time, until things that would have shocked an earlier generation became the baseline expectation for a good show. Modern historians studying Roman spectacle have pointed out how closely this mirrors the psychology of any audience that's shown increasingly extreme content over time. The bar for what feels normal moves without anyone noticing it move. The gladiatorial games didn't end because Rome suddenly grew a conscience. They faded out over centuries. As Christianity became the dominant religion and openly opposed the games on moral grounds, as the empire's finances collapsed and could no longer fund spectacles at that scale, and as public taste slowly shifted toward chariot racing and theater instead. The last recorded gladiatorial fight in Rome took place in the early 5th century, nearly 600 years after the games began. So the next time you watch a sport with a genuine, real risk of injury, motor racing, boxing, anything where the danger is part of the appeal, it's worth asking which parts of that instinct are actually new and which parts have just been running in the background of human civilization for 2,000 years.